everyone. Thank you so very much for joining Sustainable Japan Project's YouTube channel. We have launched this channel back in January 2022 in order to achieve our mission of creating a more sustainable world at the global level by inviting people from all fields and sectors around the globe to discuss new ways of collaboration and development of sustainable cross-border business in all areas for our planet 100 years from now. My name is Wakako from ASTERI Corporation, which is the founding member of Sustainable Japan Project, and I will be the MC for today's session. So for the month of February, we have Joachim Monkelbaan from the World Economic Forum, which is an international and non-governmental organization based in Geneva, Switzerland. And Joachim currently works as the climate trade lead at the World Economic Forum. Welcome, Joachim, and thank you so very much for being our guest for the month of February.
Real pleasure to be here with you, Wakako, and great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thank you so much for your time today. And today, we would like to discuss with you the initiative of the World Economic Forum on Climate Trade Zero. But before that, we would like to know a bit about you and your background and what has led you to your current activities.
Yeah, sure. I think it all starts with my two great passions. One of them is the passion for the environment, environmental protection, because I really love the environment. And secondly, my passion for globalization and international cooperation. And somehow I was lucky enough to be able to combine those two aspects in my work. So because I was very interested in international affairs, I found out that trade especially is relevant, both for the environment, for poverty eradication, and many things. Trade is really the connection, the real connection between countries, both trade and investment. So I decided to study European law and economics, and then after that, international law and economics. And then I was able to do internships in Geneva, in Brussels, with the European Union. And my first job was with the Dutch government, with the Ministry of Economic Affairs. After that, I switched to working in Switzerland on the environment, and then on specifically trade and sustainable development at the International Center for Trade and Sustainable Development in Geneva. After that, I worked for the United Nations Environment Program on trade and environment. I did my PhD, meanwhile, in governance for sustainable development. Then I was a consultant, especially for projects advising the European Commission on trade and sustainable development. And I was also a representative for sustainable and just economic systems at an NGO in Geneva called Quaker United Nations Office. And currently I work at the World Economic Forum, and my title is Climate Trade Lead. So I look at all the different interlinkages between trade and climate change.
Very interesting. Wow. So you're an economist, right?
I like to say I'm polyvalent or multi-sectoral or multidisciplinary. So I like economics, law, and also political science, because I think it's very important to look at issues from different aspects.
Wow, very multi-talented as I knew you. Great. So now going to the issue of initiative taken by the World Economic Forum, where you currently work at, on Climate Trade Zero. So what are the key elements of this initiative?
So the Climate Trade Zero initiative within the World Economic Forum, it's an initiative where we look at all those different interlinkages between trade and climate change, because there's many interlinkages. Climate change will have an impact on trade. For example, food production patterns might change, and trade in food might change. Also, harbors and infrastructure might be affected by climate change. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of things that we can do through trade for the environment. And we are working on using really trade as a positive tool for climate action in 4 ways. The first way is to look at trade in low emissions technologies. So to see what are the trade barriers currently to goods and services that we need for lowering our emissions, and then seeing how we can foster trade, take down those trade barriers and take other measures. That's the first track. The second track is about investment facilitation. So we know, for example, through the recent McKinsey report, that we need trillions of dollars of additional investment every year in climate action. And I'm saying investments because these are not just costs, but these are really investments. For example, through these investments, we will have lower cost of fuel use in the future. And especially we need to make sure that the finance reaches developing countries. The third track is about climate competitiveness or carbon competitiveness. So for example, when countries put carbon pricing into place, as the EU has done, then they might be worried that the competitiveness of their industries is going down. So what they then do is something that the EU is also planning to do, which is put in place a carbon border adjustment measure, and that can have real impact on trade. The positive flip side of that coin is that some countries might also become more competitive in a carbon constrained world. So for example, countries where a lot of renewable energy is available, they might become more competitive. And we need to look at how we can use trade to use that competitiveness. And then the fourth track is about greening demand. First of all, greening demand from government, because government often are the biggest purchasers in a country. They purchase a lot of goods and services, and we need to make sure that those goods and services are as clean as possible. But also you can see that in supply chains, we need to green supply chains, especially upstream, but also downstream. And when we look at consumer-facing companies that directly sell their products to consumers, they often have a lot of cash available that they could better invest upstream in their value chains, so that also, for example, small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries have access to the finance to lower their emissions. And then through those four tracks, we also take a sectoral perspective. So, for example, yesterday we hosted a dialogue on low carbon transport. We will also have similar dialogues on the energy sector, on the food and agricultural sector, and on the manufacturing sector. So you can see that in those sectors, all those four tracks of low carbon technologies, investment, green demand, and competitiveness, they all come back there. So that's how we connect the dots.
Wow, that's a lot of dots. Wow, to
But it's
connect,
interesting.
right?
It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, no, I was going to say, as we move forward with Sustainable Japan projects activities, we find it's very important and it's critical for all sectors and fields to collaborate, right? And as you just explained, energy sector, food and manufacture, and all those different fields and their supply chains, they have to come together in order to, well, not to protect our planet, but for our planet to exist 100 years from now, right? And in order for us to hand our baton to the next generations.
Absolutely, yes. Well, the planet will exist, of course, but the question is in which state, and we have a lot of control over that. So it's very important that especially in this day and age where we have the choice to do things differently, that we put our full effort into changing our way to do things. Yeah.
So
that has a lot to do with empowerment. We need to empower decision makers, both in the private sector and the public sector, to change the way we do things. Yeah.
And to keep involving all stakeholders, right, in different sectors, not just government and private entities, but NGOs, NPOs, and local communities that are involved in carrying out our daily lives on this planet. So, yes. Thank you so much. That's very thorough explanation on your initiative. And just going to the element of innovation, I understand that there has been this concept of 3 R's, like reduce, reuse, and recycle. But now it's shifting towards to this concept of circular economy, which is to change the product's life cycle from their design phase so as not to create any waste to begin with. So this type of concept is used for investment facilitation, you know, some of the elements that you explained earlier, and carbon competitiveness, I'm sure, and greening demands.
Yes, indeed. So then when we talk about circular economy, I think the circular economy is in a very critical stage at the moment. And it's at the stage that climate action was earlier. So you could say the thinking on circular economy is maybe 10 or 20 years behind. So it's very important that we scale up circular economy understanding very quickly. And as you say, indeed, especially for circular economy, this collaboration along the value chain, the production chain is extremely important. So before, the producer of plastics didn't have to talk to the recycler or the waste company. But now, because the recycling company needs to be able to sort the different types of plastics and to reuse them, they need to talk to the producer. And even as you say, what is different between the 3R concept and circular economy is that the 3R concept is kind of an afterthought, right? Once you have the waste, you kind of try to find out how you recycle, reduce, or reuse it. So circular economy is really taking this whole systems approach and really thinking from the design phase of a product, how the product can be recycled later on and can be reused more than recycled actually. So we also need other stakeholders to be involved in the thinking. For example, universities, think tanks, research institutions. It's extremely important also for the innovation aspect that all those knowledge institutions are involved. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So, by the way, how is the current status in Switzerland when it comes to citizens or, you know, nationals' awareness towards circular economy?
I would say there's not that much of a difference actually between Switzerland and other countries as far as I know, and I can actually better speak for the Netherlands because that's what I know most about. I'm a citizen of the Netherlands. So there's not a high level of understanding yet, but in the business world, it's a very fashionable concept. There's a hype around circular economy, but very few people know how to really implement it in their own companies, especially for smaller companies. It's very difficult to understand the concept and to know how they can play an important role in it. And of course, plastics are key to a circular economy. If you now, for example, look at your bowl of salad that you might buy in the supermarket, if you quickly want to buy a salad, it might be wrapped in plastic. And there's maybe 3 or 4 different types of plastics in the plastic bowl of salad. So it's very difficult to recycle that kind of plastics. And we know that food wrappings are a main cause of plastic pollution. So we really need to look at food wrapping. And it's challenging because on the one hand, plastic is a perfect material to wrap food. And actually we avoid a lot of food waste by using plastic. It's really about what we do with the plastic afterwards. We need to do everything we can to avoid that the plastic ends up in the environment, especially in the ocean. Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree with you. Thank you so much. And that is directly tied to investment, how money moves around the world, right? And investors are now looking hard into what companies do and what their main activities are with respect to, you know, which is also tied to circular economy because, you know, people look at the company's ways of developing products and see whether that's eco-friendly or not and whether to invest in that particular company or not.
Exactly, and there's really a shifting going on because investors, of course, mainly look at risk and at yield. And in the past, they thought there was a higher risk, for example, in low carbon investments and a lower yield But in practice, and what we see more and more, what is proven scientifically is that from practice is that actually climate investments and sustainable investments, they have a lower risk and a higher yield. So this is really causing a tectonic shift in the investment world. I think one challenge is to find the vehicles or the destinations for the investment. So there you see again that we need a whole systemic approach of trade, yes, and design, the way that we produce, the way that we invest. Those all need to go together, and for that we need public-private cooperation, and that's actually what the World Economic Forum stands for. This public-private cooperation between all the different stakeholders and fostering the multi-stakeholder approach.
Mm-hmm. Fostering the multi-stakeholder approach is really the key, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, yeah, I just wanted to say other things also come into place that you would not directly think of, and maybe less technical things, but things like trust. You know, in order to have cooperation, you need to have a high level of trust, and for that you need to be ethical, and there needs to be a level of moral involvement also. So to have a high ethical and moral standards is critical to build the trust in order to have the cooperation. So that's where it starts, I think. Yeah.
Very interesting, and I fully agree with you. So when it comes to trade policy, what is the current status with respect to cooperation among countries? When it comes to systemic approach, multi-stakeholder approach, and trust that you just described?
Well, as we all know, it's a challenging time, right, for multilateral cooperation. So earlier in this century, in this millennium, in 2001, countries agreed on the Doha round at the WTO. And they were able to multilaterally agree that they would talk about liberalization of environmental goods and services. Now we are 2022, and there's some work going on in the WTO, but it has been difficult even plurilaterally to agree on the liberalization of environmental goods and services. So I think additional effort is needed there, again, from all parties. So it's important that NGOs, that business talk to their governments and say that they want this. They want to foster trade in goods that are good for the environment, goods and services that are good for the environment. So there's especially plurilateral ideas coming up. So in the WTO, for example, you have the trade and environmental sustainability structured discussions, which will cover topics like circular economy. They will talk about environmental goods and services, climate change, and the reform of fossil fuel subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, Germany this year, and actually Japan next year, will be hosting the G7 meetings. So Germany wants to talk about something called climate clubs, and a climate club is kind of an alliance of countries that want to take action on climate change together, that want to agree on at least a minimum price on carbon, and that want to take other measures together on climate change. Now, the question is whether this kind of initiative will be limited to a small group of countries, or that it will be an open initiative where all countries can join, and where all countries are empowered to join this kind of initiative. Yeah.
Yes. So when it comes to, you just described about G7, right? Next one, Germany, and the one after in Japan. And so when it comes to developing countries, what's the status on their involvement?
This is really a critical topic, I think, because when we think about developing countries, we often think about the least developed countries, I think, where there's a whole diversity of countries in between, let's say, the OECD countries and the least developed countries. And actually, there's less and less, fewer and fewer least developed countries in the world. More and more countries are becoming middle-income countries or fast-growing economies. And those countries will have the biggest impact on the environment in the future. There's also the biggest opportunities there to eradicate hunger and poverty, which are extremely important because that's often what countries care about right now, here and today, to make sure that their population is fed. So it's very important to look from their perspective, and it's very difficult actually to speak about the developing countries in general, because every country is unique. But for sure, there might be some products and some ways in which those countries can be competitive, and in which the transition to a sustainable economy can be beneficial for those countries and their population.
Yes, thank you so much, Joachim, for your valuable comments. And my last question to you would be, what each of us then can do to contribute to creating more sustainable world for a planet 100 years from now?
That's a key question, because in the end, it's about all of us. We are all involved, and as consumers, when we're in the supermarket and we buy product A or we buy product B, that makes a difference on a daily basis. So I think it all starts with curiosity and with interest, and just elevating our level of understanding of what is happening and which products are good or which products are bad. Because I think it's important to avoid that we only make decisions based on emotions. Emotions are important. We are humans, are emotional beings, but we are also rational and spiritual. So we need to look at all those dimensions. I think it starts with curiosity, with empowering people, because a lot of people might feel that their small action doesn't make a difference, but all together it adds up, all our actions. And I think for that, a sense of kind of the unity of humanity, right? We are all in this together is very important. And again, that people have trust in each other, in their society and in their government is extremely important. So it's important we all show our commitment, and that we also have a positive attitude, because if we just see doom and gloom into the future, that might prevent us actually from taking the right actions. So being realistic, but also optimistic, I think that's extremely important.
Yes, I again fully agree with you when it comes to unity of humanity, instead of moving towards more protectionist measures, right? When it comes to trade policy, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so very much for your time today, Joachim, and all your valuable comments and insights, which is really, the key and bottom line message to all of us who are listening to this YouTube channel. We will keep each other posted, and let's not give up hope for our next generations. And well, thank you everyone for watching our YouTube channel, and we will see you again next month at our next session of interview.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We can get this done together, this great transition. Thank you.
Yes,
have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Joachim.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.